generally speaking, I'm a big fan of the MGM, Abbott and Costello films. I feel like, maybe again because they didn't get to work with them every day, it wasn't a cookie cutter conveyor belt type situation. They only got them sporadically, so they tended to take more care with them. And what's interesting about the MGM films is that even though they are clearly Abbott and Costello films, they keep with the Abbott and Costello traditions. They keep with the formula, getting their old classic routines in there, the boy-girl stories. They feel like Abbott and Costello movies, but again, they feel just a little bit bigger. They feel like there's a little bit more room to breathe. They feel fresher. And again, they're working with different directors, as opposed to the same director kind of over and over and over again. Nothing against those great directors like Gene Yarborough, who directed a number of their films. But, new eyes on a project really can help out. So, the films they did for MGM are generally really good and among some of their best work. I can't say that for this one. I'm sorry to say that upon reflection and upon rewatching it, I feel like this is definitely the worst of their MGM run and one of their weaker pictures. And it's really weird when you consider that all the other MGM pictures of theirs are just really, really good. And this one just feels like it really misses the mark. It feels tired. It feels stretched. The script doesn't feel like an Abbott and Costello film. It just doesn't hold up. I'd say it's a little bit above Ride 'em Cowboy at this stage of their careers in terms of quality. It just doesn't work out too much. So why not? What happened to this one? Well, let's talk about it. So first of all, the basics. What is this one about? Well, in this one, Abbott and Costello play members of a traveling vaudeville troupe along with the leading lady for the film, Marilyn Maxwell. We're going to talk about her in a second. That's the actor's name, Marilyn Maxwell, not the characters. And they get stranded in fictional Arab City X. It's a fictional place. They're stranded there. A exiled prince takes a liking to Marilyn Maxwell and wants her help in overthrowing his evil uncle who has usurped his throne. The evil uncle is essentially Jafar from Aladdin, just not as charismatic or interesting. And I don't like Aladdin, so that's saying something. And so she, Bud, and Lou sneak into the palace. They go through all these hijinks to try to get these magic rings that the uncle has that hypnotizes people. The uncle has also hypnotized a band that they were traveling with the band leader Jimmy Dorsey, who's a real person in his actual band. And yeah, so basically Abbott and Costello running around inside this palace, trying to undo this evil uncle. So, yeah, that's basically the plot. It's kind of Abbott and Costello meet Aladdin, really. Where to start with this one? I think the main place to start is just watching this one. This doesn't feel like an Abbott and Costello movie. The script does not really feel like this is a Bud and Lou picture. It feels to me like this is either a rough draft or an abandoned version of one of the Hope and Crosby Road pictures. There's nothing to back that up, and I don't think it actually is. I'm just saying that's how it feels. This doesn't feel like it fits their energy. And this is not to say that the boys won't go on and do outstanding, supernatural films. We know that, and it's not even to say that they can't do high fantasy. They can. But I don't know. This one, it just, the whole thing of an evil king overthrowing a prince, magic rings that hypnotize people, I don't know, at this point in their careers, that just doesn't feel like an Abbott and Costello film. And the film does not play to their strengths. There's not a lot of real opportunity for the boys to do the things that they are best at. There's not really a lot of reaction to the environment. There are a couple of fun parts that they have with it, but there's just not a whole lot to justify. You know, the name Lost in a Harem, you know, I don't know. I picture something different than they're kind of in the harem for maybe like 5 minutes. You know, the only thing really lost in the harem is there is a fun scene where Lou dresses in drag and pretends to be the evil sultan's first wife. And that's a fun scene. That's also a fun scene, I gotta give this up, because Bud puts on a disguise so he looks like the Sultan, and he and the Sultan do the mirror routine, that thing kind of made famous by Groucho and Harpo Marx, and he does a version of that. I always like whenever little things come up that show off the range of Bud Abbott's talent. I love Lou Costello, but I don't think Bud Abbott gets quite the credit he deserves for how talented he was. And he was a talented comedian in his own right. Just because he was the straight man and did the setups, he was in vaudeville and performance for a long time, and he did a lot of comedy acts. And this is a small bit, but it's a bit to show he has great comic timing. And yeah, so it's a wonderful little bit for him. So that's a highlight. Another highlight of this one is like right at the very beginning when they're in the nightclub and they're doing their botched nightclub act where they're playing magicians, and you know the act keeps going wrong, and Lou thinks it's really magic, and he figures out how it's done. And it's a fun little bit because it feels like something they actually did on vaudeville. It feels like you're actually watching one of their vaudeville routines live, and it's a fun feeling. Aside from that, there's not a lot of really memorable moments in here. At least not for the right reasons, in my opinion. There is one standard Abbott and Costello routine that they do in this one, only it's not completely an Abbott and Costello routine. It's more of a general vaudeville routine, because I know the Three Stooges did it. So the one they do in this film is, they changed the name, but it goes basically by the name of Niagara Falls. Only here they change it to the name Pocomoco. Basically, in this skit, Lou gets in jail with a disturbed man. And so in the film, Bud, Lou, and Marilyn Maxwell are thrown in jail. And Lou and Bud are sharing a cell with this crazy guy played by Maury Leonard. And Maury Leonard's telling them the story about, this stranger who came and stole his wife and his child, and he swore one day he'd find him, and he found him one day on the banks of the Pocomoco. And every time he hears the word Pocomoco, he starts going into this, slowly I turned, step by step, and finally pounces on Lou and beats Lou up. And then every time he hears the word, this follows. Okay, great. Fun bit. Lou getting beat up by a crazy person is pretty funny. And, Lou carries it off. And Bud kind of making excuses for the guy is also pretty funny, because Lou's always so put upon. Okay, great. It's a fun scene. It works well. Great. About halfway through the movie, Bud and Lou, while they're running around the Sultan's palace, they get captured and they're thrown into the dungeon. In the dungeon is Mr. Pocomoco. Okay, fine and dandy. It's a funny joke. Somehow the guy went from one jail to the next. Okay. But what happens is this extended scene. I don't know how long the scene goes on. It feels like just shy of forever. where this guy is imagining that there's another person in the room with him, and he wants to introduce Lou to his friend Mike, and but Lou obviously doesn't see the guy, and Bud's pretending like the guy is there, and Mr. Pokomoko gets mad at the Invisible Man, accidentally shoots him. It's this whole thing, and it goes on forever. It drags everything down. It's this plot cul-de-sac, and moreover, it's not funny. And it's not funny because, I'm sorry, I'm watching an Abbott and Costello movie. I want the humor to be on Lou Costello. I don't want this guy. And Lou reacting to the crazy stuff is funny for a little while, but after it keeps going and going and going, it's just like, please stop and let's get back to the actual plot. And that is kind of another problem with this film, is that it is really, really padded. Now, part of the upside to going to MGM is, again, their sets are bigger. The whole production feels more expensive, especially in this one. I think of the 4 they did for MGM, this is definitely the most lavish. They're using some of the big sets. But along with that goes the MGM pomp and circumstance, including the requisite MGM musical numbers. MGM was very famous for their musicals. And so, and Abbott and Costello movies are, famous or infamous for the musical interludes. So, seems like a perfect match. Well, the musical interludes in this with Jimmy Dorsey and his orchestra, again, go on just shy of forever. They are long. They come in the middle of everything. Anytime the story's picking up, we got to stop and have one of these damn musical numbers. And I'm not saying that they're not interesting to look at for a little bit. In one of them, the dancing is phenomenal. In the very first time we see Jimmy Dorsey and his orchestra, they are, in a parade, and it's neat to see how they're getting, a big band in a parade. Like the piano player is walking behind 3 guys carrying the piano on their back. So it's really well thought out and visually very interesting. But just some of them just go on and on and on, and it doesn't feel like there's a lot of connecting tissue. Some other interesting standouts about this. So this stars in a supporting role J. Lockhart Martin, who was the tallest actor in Hollywood at the time, and like most tall actors, did a lot of monsters. He's probably most famous for playing Gort, the machine monster from The Day the Earth Stood Still. So he has a fun role in this. I wish I could tell you something fun he did. He really didn't do much aside from stand around and be tall, and Lou and Bud kind of going, oh my god, he's tall. That's kind of it. The other really big selling point to me when I first watched this one, because this one, again, since MGM, this wasn't released in the same re-releases that all the Universal ones were when I was a kid, so it took me a while to find this one and watch it. And one of the big selling points for me was Marilyn Maxwell being their co-star, because Marilyn Maxwell, I came to know her from the Abbott and Costello radio show. She was one of the regulars on that in its early days, and she would basically play Lou's on and off again girlfriend, basically someone who had a different job depending on what the episode called for. She and Lou were dating if the episode called for it, but she'd just come and go, hi Louis, honey, and they had really good chemistry on the radio. I really liked her on the show, and I was like, oh great, this is fantastic. Get to see this person I've only heard on the radio. And she's good, she's good enough, but I do wish that she had more interaction with Bud and Lou. I don't feel like there was really a lot of interaction with them. They do some stuff, but nothing really memorable. She spends most of her time, she's the girl in the boy-girl relationship. In this one, it's her and the prince, who immediately falls in love with her, and she immediately falls in love with him. It's another one of those problems where they're arguing with each other for most of the film, and then suddenly they're like, "But I love you." It's like, but okay, when did that happen? You know, the whole point to him getting her to seduce the uncle is because she's a blonde. You know, that's a big thing. So, so she's good, but I don't know. I wanted more, and I'm sad that this is kind of the only Abbott and Costello film that she ever did, because I would have liked to have, again, she had great chemistry with Lou on the radio, but you know, we don't really get to see any examples of that in the film. I'm really stretching for this one. I want to say more, but I don't know what else there really is to say. I just feel like this one, I know it wasn't thrown together. I know that. Especially considering that Lou was sick for so long, so they had more time, even more than usual, to work on it, to get the script ready. But the pieces don't come together. It's the same problem I had with writing Cowboy, or Ride 'em Cowboy. It doesn't, it's got all these different parts, and none of it really feels like it ever comes together in a cohesive whole. Or whenever something funny is about to happen, it's immediately sidelined, and we move on to the next thing. And a lot of the bits that could have been funny don't have a lot of time to breathe. The bit with Abbott and Costello in disguise as the Sultan and his wife, respectively, there's a lot you could have done with that, and they just kind of let it flop, you know? So yeah, I'm not sure about this one. I am sad to say that I do think this is one of their poorer outings. I mean, but like I said with Ride 'em Cowboy, you make 30-some movies, some of them aren't going to work, and this one, you know, in retrospect, doesn't work. And I'm not even touching the concept of how offended we should be by this now. I don't know. Watched it, I was like, I don't know how. I mean, it is pretty stereotypical. But again, that time, that place, I don't hold things like that normally against a film unless it's really egregious. But yeah, I'm sure Arab Americans would not be as, you know, forgiving, and with good reason. You know, I'm not saying that's a unreasonable response. So this outing for MGM doesn't work out as well, and it kind of sputters, in my opinion, their return. But good news, ladies and gentlemen, because the next Bud and Lou film is going to make up for all of that, in my opinion, and make up for it in spades by taking Bud and Lou a little bit back to basics. And kind of like they had to do after, you know, when they did the James Bond movies and they did The Spy Who Loved Me, and this was a huge, big film. The next one they did was For Your Eyes Only, which pared it down a little bit and brought things back to basics. And that is what Bud and Lou are going to do with their next feature. So next time we meet, Bud and Lou are going to college. And when they go to college, they're going to find, here come the co-eds. So I hope you'll join me for that. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for enjoying. And as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.